Pyramid being 140 meters high, there is more than enough resistance. After many trials and experiments, the Egyptians had acquired the technique they used for the first pyramid of Djoser, built 180 years earlier. The construction of the pyramid started 4 years ago. We are at ground level. The mold for the first cornerstone is in place. Arranged in Indian file, in African file, the workers pass the buckets one after the other, from the mixing tank to the mold. They pour the white concrete, and about 30 minutes later the mold is filled. Today we call this process formwork construction. But let's go back a few years. A little further, when the Egyptians settled on the banks of the Nile. Long before they discovered a numbering system, they started from the simple principle of 1 to 10 by counting their fingers. Then they counted their toes, plus 10, and thereby appropriated the numbering system of 10 by 10 by 10. It is the same system that we use today. After language, numbering is the second thing humanity learned, long before writing. The numbering system by 10 is for humans the first gateway to scientific understanding of the environment. It is a kind of bridge between the primitive mind and intelligence. The Egyptians observed that the year is made of 365 days plus 1. They cut it into 3 seasons, 4 months each, for a total of 12 months. The seasons were called flood, germination, and harvest. Over the years, they observed a strange phenomenon. Each year in summer, on a specific day, July 14th, a star, the brightest, rose with the sun, and a few minutes later, it disappeared into the light. The same day, the Nile flooded the fields. The floods were fertile, essential to life, to produce food. Egyptians deified this star and called it Sopdet, or Septi. It was the star that announced the floods of the Nile. Today we call it Sirius. This phenomenon is called the Heliacal Rising of Sirius. It was the first day of the Egyptian year, followed by 5 holidays. The Nile brought the essential silt for the crops. It is for this reason that this star was sacred to them. The land was flooded for 3 to 4 consecutive months. Work in the fields stopped, and during this time the Egyptians went up into the hills to be on dry land. Well, it was the start of 3 months of vacation. And it was like that year after year for thousands of years. This episode is hidden and is not explained by Egyptologists. They don't speak at all about floods of the Nile. An innocent mind immediately wonders, but what did they do for 3 or 4 months if they couldn't cultivate the fields? The Egyptians did 3 things during these 3 to 4 months of vacation: observe, measure, and note everything. As soon as the Nile returned to its bed, a big problem had arisen. Field limits had disappeared. It was then necessary to retrace the limits of the fields of each peasant and start sowing as soon as possible. And they had to be traced correctly to avoid disputes. Therefore, the Egyptians began to draw straight lines, rectangles, squares, diagonals, circles, and triangles with strings and sticks. Everything was noted on papyrus. It was the beginning of geometry. They understood a fundamental function of nature. Everything is divided or assembled in small equal units. This observation will serve them throughout their discoveries. They also needed a unit of measure to properly demarcate the plots. Geometry is good, but after all, you must measure the lines. They considered the king's foot. The length of the king's foot could be used as a standard. This standard would be multiplied and distributed throughout the kingdom. They considered the feet, arms, legs, and elbows of the king, but there was a problem. This unit was not fixed. There would be no problem during his reign, but all the kings were not the same size. The next king would surely want to use his foot or his elbow out of pride. In the hills, waiting for the retreat of the Nile, the Egyptians thought and looked for a solution to the problem. This unit of measurement would have to have a fixed length in time, if possible, never change. They observed the size of different plants, fruits, seeds, any object in nature. But all these objects did not have a constant size. For example, if we water a seed well, the following year its size will have changed. And over long distances, small differences quickly became significant. Then, they had the idea to measure water. Yes, fresh water from the Nile. They measured one drop and then another. They were all the same size. From the lower Nile to the upper Nile, the drops were the same size. They noticed that the size of the water drop did not change year after year. It's wonderful. The Egyptians found a unique unit. The diameter of the drop of water on a waterproof surface, like granite or alabaster, is constant. It measures 1 centimeter. Today, an incredible video in which you will dive into the heart of the first stage of the Serapeum project. Oola, 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 oola. So this is the stop M on the diagram. I don't know if the Egyptians knew the meter or not. I don't know at all. You even checked the measurement? You measured it 2 times? I double every measure every time. Okay, so 1 meter. 1.000 meters. Precisely 1 meter measured by laser twice in a row. They named this small unit the royal finger. 10 drops of water or 10 royal fingers equals 1 royal hand. 100 drops of water, so 100 royal fingers or 10 royal hands, equals 1 royal leg. Centuries later, these discoveries were taken out of secret coffers and renamed. The royal finger was called the centimeter, the royal hand the decimeter, and the royal leg the meter. They were presented as recent discoveries, and the French appropriated them, made in France. The diameter of the drop of fresh water measures what is now called 1 centimeter. Water is a universal constant. The size of the drop of fresh water will never change for thousands and millions of years. Yes, the universal unit, the meter, was not invented in 1780, but it was discovered by the Egyptians millennia ago. The meter is a universal unit because it is measured on water. Water is the only material that is stable. All other materials or objects are difficult to measure, or else they vary over time. The architecture of the entire universe is constructed with this unit. Using the meter, this immutable unit, were defined the 6 fundamental units of physics and chemistry today. Amperes, Celsius, moles, candelas, seconds, and kilograms. So, everything. Now that the Egyptians had discovered the meter, they could trace the plots without a problem. With the meter, they measured everything and recorded everything. They took a disc with the diameter of a royal leg and wrapped a string around it. They unrolled the string and measured it. The parameter of the disc was 3 royal legs and 14 royal fingers, or 314 royal fingers. A disc with a diameter of 10 unrolled corresponded to 31 units and 4 subunits.